There we go. Okay. Here we are. So welcome to Songwriting Struggles and how to get past them. So what we'd like to do is really take a look at what are some of the songwriting struggles that people have. So the first the first thing that we want to do is ask you guys, what are some of the struggles that you have in your own songwriting? And I'm going to stop the share so I can see the chat box, but what are some of the struggles that you guys have personally? Maybe put them in the chat box, or you can speak up as well.
Well, Chad, I'd say my biggest struggle over the years has been to kind of break out of the mold of my personality in my songs. And I find that other songwriters also have the same mold. When I listen to them, their songs sound similar, exact same style, exact same personality, but so that's my one of my, and also I'm kind of stuck back in the 70s, with a lot of the styles, and so a lot of my music is dated.
Sure. Well, we'll definitely in my presentation I actually cover some of that stuff, so we'll definitely talk about, I think I definitely relate to all of that. I grew up in the 80s, so a lot of my music sounds like Prince and Janet Jackson and sort of the 80s pop R&B stuff. And I think there's a level of we'll never escape some of our style. I think it's kind of like there's part of us that comes out no matter what. And I actually think that's a good thing. But if your songs all sound exactly the same, then that's where the problem comes in. But we'll talk about that as well. Let's see what other folks are saying in here. So Paula says, say something in a new way and not be cliche. That's definitely a challenge. We'll talk about that. Christine, you said time and money, and that's time and money, or can't really help you with the money part tonight unless we're going to take a collection, but we definitely can talk about the timing piece. Patrick says he really struggles with listening to words. His verses feel like they lack a certain life that takes them beyond poetry. Okay, we'll kind of touch on that as well. I think that's the craft right there, right? I think that's what we all strive for. And you think when you hear a really good song, it sounds very simple, but the amount of sort of know-how and work that goes into that simplicity, I think, is really what makes it not so simple. So it might be simple, but it's not easy. Tara says deciding on just the right melody changed her mind a lot, and it just until it feels right. So melody is something that I think a lot of people struggle with. And I think that's another thing that takes a lot of practice. And I don't know if anybody really feels like they really have it. Somebody else, Tom says, trying not to write the same song over and over again. So that's what John had said as well. Doyle, deciding what is good and effective of what you've written. What do you mean by that, Doyle?
I tend to fall in love with what I've written, and then you give it the 3-day test, and you're just like, oh yeah, still like it, and then and you find out it's maybe not.
So do you mean that you like it, but it maybe doesn't come across the way that you think it does, or
right, or maybe 3 or 4 months later you realize, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sure. Well, I think definitely putting things away for a while is a technique to sort of listen with fresh ears too. I think I go the opposite way sometimes, where I don't like something, and then a few months later I come back and I listen and I'm like, well, that wasn't so bad. So it's we're in our own heads a lot. Pat, you said you have some transitioning from verse to chorus. We'll talk about that. Mary, getting out of your comfort zone with writing the same style in a lot of songs. That's definitely a struggle. Carrie coming up with an original melody. There's only 12 notes, so a lot of times melodies are going to be very similar to each other. And I think, sometimes we worry that we're going to sound too much like another song. Sometimes we do by accident, but as long as you're not like blatantly copying another melody, you can definitely use your influences to try to come up with things as well. And Christine talks about that, trying not to unconsciously use anyone's songs. Andrea Stolpe talked about in Nashville that professional writers don't really worry about, does this sound too much like someone else until it gets time to like record it and release it. And then you can change certain parts that sound. But in the writing process, you don't necessarily want to pull in your critic or pull in that sort of creative stop. If it sounds good, do it, and then if it does, if you play it for people and they're like, that sounds exactly like, whatever song, then maybe it's something that you want to change, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. Tara talks about being unique. Joe, you struggle with melody and style. Your songs are so different, and also you struggle with getting deep with the lyrics. Kathy, knowing what modes to go with for what emotional feeling. Ooh, that's a good question. I'm going to write that down. We could probably have a mode workshop for like an entire week, just getting into modes, because that gets a little bit into the theory, but we can talk about that. Keeping lyrics in line over a central theme, that's good as well. Motivation and trying to overcome perfectionism. That's a really tough one. I think what we have to do is we really need to meet ourselves where we are, right? Like, I think sometimes we beat ourselves up because we don't sound like the people that we sort of idolize. And a lot of times it's not even possible to do what someone else does because that's their thing. You need to find your thing to really find out what's the best you, rather than trying to be someone else. Joel, you said writing in a more conversational style. How many of you find that sometimes you overwrite? You try to be too clever, too poetic. It sounds very trite, and you're like, this sounds like I tried too hard. We'll talk about that. So a lot of people, if you see, there's a lot of style and a lot of lyric things that people have talked about. So I'm gonna go back to share, and let's see if I can keep the chat box. Yes, sweet. Okay. So we talked about, what are your struggles? One of the ones that comes up all the time, because all of us have a lot of things that we do. Maybe we have work, maybe we have kids, maybe we have to take care of a significant other. Maybe we're just lazy. One of the things that people talk about is not having time to write. And I think one of the ways to really, or a few of the ways to really get over this is really make a system for your writing. So take some of the inspiration out and kind of turn to your know-how. And what I mean by that is, if you know the steps to writing a song, you can really sit down and make it happen without waiting for that inspiration to strike. So knowing like, okay, I have a process of writing my verses, or I have a process of writing my chorus, you can sit down and take time. And sometimes it's just 5 minutes a day. And one of the effective ways of doing this is to do free writing or object writing, or what Andrea Stolpe calls destination writing, is write from a who, when, or a where, and write for 5 minutes, whatever comes to your mind. And a lot of times when you do that, your mind will start to pick up on things that sound like good ideas. And the other thing about songwriting too is teach your mind to go through the day thinking like a songwriter. And what I mean by thinking like a songwriter is really to look at the world and see if there's things that you could write about, or listen to what things are, or what people are saying. If you can write that down for titles, maybe make it your goal to write down 10 titles a day that come to your mind, and really do little bits and pieces of writing so you don't feel so overwhelmed. I think sometimes we think we have to sit down and write a song in one sitting. And I think that kind of sets us up for a little bit of failure, because that sort of comes into that perfectionism thing as well. So just set aside 5 minutes every day and write something, and that doesn't matter what it is. Um, just write something every day, and then after a whole year, think of what those 5 minutes add up to. And I guarantee you, if you set your timer for 5 minutes, a lot of days you'll probably want to go longer because the inspiration bug will strike. Um, I believe that inspiration comes from perspiration and not the other way around. So I believe if you do the work, that the inspiration will follow. Anybody have thoughts on that? And a couple of the other things that I have here is, don't think of writing a full song right away. You could just jam on a chord progression for 5 minutes. Maybe pick some chords that you haven't used before, and kind of go with that. So what we're going to do is to put some of this into practice. Is we're actually going to do a lyric exercise now, and we're going to take a few minutes to actually see how easy it is to come up with ideas and information and material within a short amount of time. So, what we're going to do for this exercise is I Googled lists of emotions. So, what I'd like all of you to do is I'm going to set my cell phone timer for 3 minutes, and I want you to pick one of the emotions off of this chart, and I want you to write whatever comes to mind about this emotion. So what does it feel like? What is it? And then maybe use your senses. Like, what does like one of these emotions look like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? Those types of things. And go through each sense, and then also just write whatever comes to mind. So any questions on this first part of the exercise? So pick an emotion and then free write on it. Try to do it from your senses for 3 minutes, and we'll go ahead and we'll get started now. And that is our 3 minutes. So does anybody want to share? We have time for a couple of people to probably share what they wrote. Is anybody
I will.
looking to be brave? Okay. Christine?
I see the wind in the trees and the sand dusting up from the beach.
Okay. And what
That
what
was under happy, under joyful.
okay. Perfect. Awesome. Anybody else want to share?
Mine's kind of long.
That's okay.
Okay. I wrote, heavy like the body I heave out of bed in the morning, heavy like the cold rain licking at my toes through my leather boots, tripping through a puddle, heavy like the scent of cheap whiskey as the rocks clatter over one another as they too ultimately melt away. As brief as the time we shared together, heavy like the last 2 years dragging this anchor behind me as it squeals and sparks on the sidewalk, keeping me in this godforsaken city of pragmatic puppets dancing on golden strings and stiletto heels, heavy like the heel of composite plastic, tapping, 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 thudding down the grocery store aisle for another pint of ice cream. So
Cool. Very nice. Very cool. So did you see in Patrick's writing how a lot of images came out that sort of took you somewhere? And I think, Patrick, before this, did you have any idea that you would have written any of that, you know?
No, I didn't have that planned.
So I think when you tell yourself that you don't have time to write, I think it's not necessarily true, because you could set a timer for 1 minute and write what comes to mind, or 2 minutes, or 3 minutes. Anybody else want to share before we move on?
I would.
Sure.
Let's go. I didn't hear everybody. So Trevor, you go first.
All right. The word I used was under the sad one. It was called weepy. It's called I am a weepy willow. I am weepy with no energy. Pushed against the wall, I am weeping willow. I scream into a pillow so nobody can hear me.
Cool. Very nice. And did I hear someone else that said they wanted to share?
Yeah,
Sure.
I did.
Tara, you go, and then Tom.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, mine was optimistic. New air feeling, energized, no longer reeling, future forward focused, hopeful no one else can hold me back. New year feeling, coming back, staying ready, smiling face, happy goals coming to fruition, intentions, letting go of the past. Worry no more, working harder. Mama, daddy would be proud. Wish I felt this way forever. Now I want to show you how.
Cool. Very good. Tom.
Funny, we both picked optimistic.
Well, there you go.
There. This storm will blow over. It'll soon be just a memory. The sun will shine again, warm on my skin, and I'll be squinting in its brightness. Nothing lasts forever, good or bad, but I will be here and stronger for the something. I ran out of time.
That was good. So I think, as you can see, just by sort of going into your mind about a different emotion, or kind of thinking about situations, you have sort of a never-ending sort of pool that you can pull from. So I think if you ever find yourself stuck in what to write about, or how are you going to progress a song, just go online and just like I did, Google like emotions and pull up a list and see what inspires you at that time, and write about that. The next part, and I think we'll probably, I guess I'll give you guys the option. So the next part of the exercise was going to be write about what caused that emotion, and write about that for 3 minutes. So I guess, do you guys want to try that part of it, or do you want to move on to some of the other topics? Try it. Maybe everybody raise your hand if you want to try it. Cool. Well, let's do 2 minutes just to kind of get everybody in. So I'll set my timer. So thinking about your emotion that you selected, we'll do 2 minutes of what got us to that emotion. So what happened to make you feel that way? And we'll start now. All right, and that is our 2 minutes. So how did that feel for everyone? Did that feel about as easy as the last one, or how did it go for you? Doyle shaking his head no.
A lot harder.
I thought it
Oh, Doyle, you muted yourself.
was harder than the previous one.
Why do you think that is?
It's hard to figure out how you get to an emotion, I think, for me.
So anybody else? Did you find that somebody else said it was harder as well? Christine, was that you?
I also needed that chart. I thought the chart helped me a lot too,
Okay.
because then I could look at things instantly and write them down. I wouldn't waste any time thinking about it. I would just write them down.
Sure. And Jay, you had your hand raised. How did that go for you?
So I just kind of took it and I just kind of pivoted with it. I mean, you basically told us what it was, and so I just kind of took it and I just wrote the journey above it, and I just kind of like wrote defining definitions was the mission which was given, finding paths to plan the plans for feelings found in visions. That's all I really got in like 2 minutes, but
Okay. Very cool. Anybody else want to share what they wrote this time around?
I
Yeah, I
will.
will. Chad, I just want to let you know, my mic is working now, so I don't know what happened, but it's working
Okay.
now. Thanks.
Okay. Let's go to Kathy and then Trevor.
Which, is that me?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. So I don't know if this really fits, but we'll go for it here.
Sure.
The inventor. He's a small town cook, but dreams of more. He's an inventor. Spends his time combing the overstocks and end-run shops, scrounging parts from cast-off stuff. Can't turn away from a good deal on mop tops and flip-flops. And that's all I got.
Very cool. Nice work. And Trevor?
I try and try to meet my expectations. I'll try and try till the day I die. I'll try and try while everyone slips by. I sigh, I push my body, I push my mind, but I'll keep trying and trying. I try and try.
Cool. So Joe in the chat says that his writing was plain, which I think that's definitely okay. I think if you listen and pay attention to a lot of songs, I think everyday plain language actually can be very powerful in the songwriting setting. He said it didn't come out as lyrics, and that's not necessarily the goal from doing a free write. So when you're doing the free write, you want your mind to just not have that critic, because I think when we go into thinking about a lyric and thinking about what's going to be a song, that's when we start to say, like, is this good or bad? And at this point, we don't want to be looking at what is good and bad. We just want to get a bunch of material that we can sort of create this palette from to actually turn it into lyrics at another time. I saw earlier that some people were talking about what's the difference between lyrics and poetry. Poetry is meant to be read and lyrics are meant to be sung. So there's a difference in the way that rhythm works, and there's a difference in the way that you can tell a story through a song. Songs have a little bit more structure, and there's a little bit more sort of repetition than some poetry. So songs are technically poems, but poems are not necessarily lyrics, if that makes sense. It really depends on what the language is doing. Poetry really hangs its hat on the language itself, whereas songs are lyric is part of a whole other piece that has melody. It has, a different type of rhythm. So they're similar but different. Anybody else have anything that they want to share?
Yeah, I do.
Greg, go ahead.
Okay, I picked joyful, and this describes my day yesterday. I saw the eagles fly over Lake Pepin on a warm, sunny day while eating a lunch brought from home.
Nice. Very good. So one of the things when you're doing these exercises, and something to keep in mind just in general, is the concrete writing when it's talking about objects and things that you can actually experience with your senses. That is going to be sort of the what happened language, and that makes really good verse material. Because what verses do is verses give the emotion of a song the context. It gives us the things that make us. It basically shows us why we should feel a certain way. If you've ever heard someone write a song and it's all emotional language, it's always saying what they feel, it's always just nothing but emotions, you don't necessarily connect to that like a song does, where it puts you into the scene. And I think writing from your senses and writing concrete material in the verses and then emotional language in the chorus is a great way to go. So kind of what we did was we did it backwards. We wrote chorus material first, and then we started to write verse material. And guess what? A lot of people said writing verses is harder. Writing verses is hard. A lot of times it's really easy to write a chorus because it just seems like that's more of the emotional thing. So and some people are probably the opposite, but I feel like for me especially, choruses are pretty easy to write. It's the verses that really make it a little bit harder. So one of the other things that people have said is their struggles, and what I've seen in other workshops, is that melodies are not that catchy. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight and kind of cover with you is what sort of causes that. What causes a weak melody? So a weak melody a lot of times comes from lyrics that lack strong meter. So if you have a lot of lyrics that really don't have sort of their own flow to them, and there's not a lot of repetition, a lot of times you will get a very weak melody because of that. Also, if there isn't repetition in general, a song will have a weak melody, because what really makes strong melodies in songs are melodic motif. And what we mean by motif is a small melodic phrase that is memorable and easy to sing, and it repeats. If you listen to a lot of your favorite songs, you'll see that the melodies that you think sound pretty complicated are actually really pretty simple, but what they're doing is they're taking a little building block and they're repeating it and using contrast between the sections to sort of add that the more complexity. So don't shy away from repetition, especially when it comes to melody. Also, sometimes fitting too many lyrics to a chord progression. I've heard a lot of songwriters that really try to say a whole bunch, and all of a sudden you're kind of rushing it and you're kind of squishing it into a bar, or trying to squish it into so it fits in with what you're saying. And that's kind of a mistake as well. So one of the things to do is to get away from that, is to write part of the melody first and then try to put lyrics to that by fitting it with the like the natural stress patterns. And I'm getting a little bit of an echo. There we go.
That's a
So
good point. Yeah. I was just gonna say, I read a couple places where Sia, the songwriter singer Sia, she'll
Yep.
just like make up random do do da 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 and figure out her melodies first and then add in her lyrics. So it seems like a
sure.
lot of people do that.
Yes. So Max Martin, who's written almost as many number one hits as Lennon and McCartney, he writes melody first, and he thinks that melody is what makes the song. So the melody is what all the lyrics hang on. And if you listen to people that he writes with and people he produces, like Taylor Swift, Ariana Grande, like a lot of really big artists, the melody, I mean, the lyrics, some of the lyrics are not super like earth shattering, but the way that they sit on the melody is where that magic comes from. So I think when you are writing melody first is a great way to sort of clean up sort of the lyrics, because I find myself personally, if I write the lyrics first, that's when my melodies just kind of fall flat, and I feel like I'm writing in a box, and it sounds like I've written in a box. And it's kind of hard to explain. So also, what could be causing a lack of melodic or melodic strength is if you're not writing to a pulse or a metronome or a beat. One of the things that can help you have better phrasing and better lyrics is writing to a beat. Even if it's just a simple metronome, it can make sure that you have more of a motif going on. Any other thoughts or questions on that?
Trevor? I have one thing. So when you're writing a melody, another good tip, like what you said, is the repeating thing, but you don't want to repeat like too much. So it's important to add some like variations in there. Like if you think about like how like people talk, like conversate with each other, it's always like question and answer. So you want to start with like your root note and then end with your root note. So say like if I made a melody like do 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 do, that's the repeating part. And then you could do something like do 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 do, kind of like a ending, kind of like a answer to your question.
Yep, exactly. And one of the tricks too is if you do something twice, do something different, and then come back to what you did the first time too, kind of the AABA thing. Joe says he recently had melodic phrasing by an instrument that inspired melody in his tracks. Yes, definitely. Especially if you're doing top line writing, where if a track has some sort of riff, and that's another thing too, is sometimes we're limited in our songwriting by how well we can play and sing at the same time, because you're sort of limited by your musical ability. So if you have a way to record your instrument and start to write away from playing at the same time, you can open up doors to how you're actually setting a melody. Looking at some other, how to write better melodies, some of the things we've talked about, write the melody first, fit the lyrics to that melody. Be careful though that you don't force words to fit a melody by stressing syllables that shouldn't be stressed, because then your song will start to sound not natural, and it won't sound believable. So write melodies first, fit the lyrics to that. Also focus on rhythmic repetition. One of the things about melody is made up of rhythm and pitch. And some people would argue that rhythm is actually more important than the pitch, because the rhythm sets the phrasing, and you can actually have the same rhythm with different notes. And when you do that in a song, that is called sequence. An example of that as like a classical piece would be like da 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 da, where it's the same rhythm but the pitch changes. Paul asked, what is prosody in songwriting or phrasing? So prosody is where your lyrical content matches what is happening in the music. So think about it from the perspective of like it's how lyric and melody marry each other. So if a song is about falling and your melody falls, that structure has prosody with what the lyric is saying. So prosody, another way to think about it is prosody is the body language of your song. So it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. So if you're singing about a sad topic and then the music sounds sad, that is prosody. But you can play with prosody as well. You can have contradiction within prosody. You might have sad lyrics on a very happy track, which in itself creates prosody of kind of excitement, maybe not feeling quite stable, those types of things. Mark says he sometimes challenged to do with melody and fit words, and then try to start with words and then fit to music. Yes. So one of the things that we talked about earlier was a lot of people said their songs sound the same. A lot of times we're writing songs the exact same way. We're picking up our instrument, we're sitting down, we're saying, I'm going to write a song. We start playing some of the same chords. We change chords at the same time. we start singing at the same time, those types of things get us stuck in sort of that writing the same song over and over again. Another thing that can help your songs is, think of verse melodies being lower in pitch. Choruses are usually higher. Create that pitch contrast. Catchy melodies usually follow notes of a scale with a few larger interval jumps. So if you listen to songs that you like, you'll probably find that the melodies are not that complicated. It's just where the interval jumps are strategically located. And also for those of you who are a little bit more theory focused, if you focus on the pentatonic scale, which is the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 notes within the scale, those notes work with almost any chord within a key. So that can help you figure out what notes work with some of the chords that you have. Any questions on some of that? Perfect. So another problem that people have a lot is I don't know what to write in the second verse. How many of you have run into this problem? Maybe show of hands. Yeah. Should be everybody, because I think what we do is we have this great idea and we sit down and we start writing and we have a verse that comes out and we write a chorus and we're like, awesome, it's saying everything that I want to say. But that's the problem, is it's saying everything that you want to say. So now all of a sudden you don't have anything else to say. So one of the keys to coming up with material for your second verse is to look at what is your first verse saying from the perspective of who, when, and where. Usually your first verse will establish at least two of those three things. And those are the things that you can advance in your second verse. So let's say, let's look at that from the perspective of like a relationship song, right? So the who, in a love song, maybe you're talking about you or the other person. So then in the second verse, you could change that to talking about yourself. So you're advancing or changing that. And then in your bridge, you could maybe talk about us or we together. When could be past, present, future. So you can advance through the song. Or you could change the order. Maybe you're starting in the present, but then in the second verse, you could take the song back to the past. Or maybe it's actually just advancing chronologically. So maybe the song starts and the verse is saying like, we met in the parking lot after work. So it's like, okay, you've established where, who, when. In the second verse, you could determine, are you going to move these characters to a different place? Are you going to keep them in the same place, but maybe just like minutes in the future? Or is it still in the present and you're just telling us what is happening next? I think that's the beauty of songwriting, is we're really writing 3-minute movies. And I think all of us have songs that take us somewhere else when we listen to them. And I think maybe I can't speak for everybody, but the idea of a lot of people is to try to take people somewhere else with the writing. So Joe, you said it really depends on the song. What do you mean by that?
Sorry, I was taking notes.
That's okay.
Well, it just depends, like when you use the past, present, or future in a verse or in a well, it would be the verses. It just depends on what your song is about and
For sure.
the various emotions that it is, how you do that. Because I think for me, I'll speak for myself.
Sure.
I would, if I tried to do that, like being asked to do that, it might come out as forced, or it just doesn't feel right because it's not naturally flowing out of a storyline or an emotion or whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the ways to sort of get past some of that is, like you said, Joe, that can seem forced to you. One of the things that you can do is, if you want to think about your story in advance, you could do it like an outline or something as well, and pick, like, instead of telling the whole story in your first verse, maybe you take just the one part of it, and turn that into another part of the song. So there's really no one way to do it, but I think it's really thinking about it. One of the simple ways is to think about that. How do you advance it? And how do you make that story move forward? So Tara said she usually overwrites and then spends a couple of days editing it down, figuring out how to arrange it all. So I think that that's really a good idea as well. I think what you want to try to avoid is saying the same thing in each verse. So make sure there's enough difference to where you're not just repeating yourself with different words, because I think that's when people get bored. Doyle says, can I repeat what I said about pentatonic scale? The notes are 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. And those notes will work with almost any chord within that key. Paul says a songwriter friend told him once to paint a picture with words. Yes. He writes pop songs, not songs describing detail over 4 verses of what kind of kiss I got last night from my wife, or the way that dogs bark annoys me. What's this notion of painting a picture with words? So great question, Paul. So if you listen to songs that appear to be more emotion based, or maybe not writing from, I would say, the senses, right? Maybe writing about emotions. A lot of times you're going to find that it's secretly using your senses, because a lot of times it's writing from a metaphor, and it's using words that give you a picture that tells you how that emotion feels. So Andrea Stolpe would call that writing through a lens. And what she means by that is writing about an emotion through an object. So let's say you write about a first date, and you write it from the perspective of a wine glass or the champagne, right? Maybe you're having champagne on a first date. We'll run with it. So in your free writing, or how you're writing, you could write the attributes of the champagne, bubbling, sparkling, tastes good, making you intoxicated, those types of things. That can then be applied to an emotion. So what does love feel like? It bubbles, it tastes good, it intoxicates you, those types of things. So you can use emotional language and give people that subconscious sort of image without actually painting like a country song picture. Because I write a lot of pop songs, and if you listen to a lot of pop music, they're still painting a picture, but in a different way. It's not quite as literal. So it's more metaphorical and things like that. Paul, hopefully that helps a little bit. Mary says, can you change the tense in the chorus effectively, or does it have to say the same thing throughout? Like I was, I am, or I saw her, I see her. So the more you can keep your chorus the same, the better, because that's the part that people like to sing along to. Do you have to keep it the same? No. But one of the things that you should try to do is take tense out of your chorus. And what we mean by taking tense out is a lot of times with verbs, if you add an ing to them, it makes it sort of tense neutral. So like maybe your song is talking about the past, where you say like, I saw you in the park. We were, just 2 people going on our way. Your eyes caught mine. We sat down on the bench and we talked, for hours. And then the chorus is like talking for hours. We're doing all these things. So now second verse is present tense. We just had dinner. Life is pretty quiet compared to how it used to be, but I'm more deeply in love with you than I've ever been before. And here we are talking for hours. The bridge comes and you say like, okay, future tense. Where can we go from here? Like I see us on, the front step of the nursing home, holding hands, blah, blah, blah. And then we're talking for hours. So you can make your chorus be tense neutral in order to change the time frame in your verses. Hopefully that helps Mary's question as well. One of the things to think about too is if you establish a problem or situation in the first verse, you can focus on a solution or resolution in the next verse. So you can expand kind of on what's happening there. This kind of fits in with what we were talking about. So some people say their lyrics are too abstract. So they're kind of, you know, they write things, but maybe their listener isn't picking up on what they're trying to say. The key to pulling out of abstract lyrics is to really write from your senses and write from sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, movement, and try to paint pictures with words. That's what Paul had said, and show the emotion without telling the emotion. And the weapon of choice for doing that, to come up with those lyrics, is really, you know, sense-based object writing or destination writing. Thanks for coming, Trevor. So also the other thing happens too, where our lyrics become too concrete, where we talk too much about our senses, and we're only sort of showing what's going on, and we're really not setting up an emotion. What you should try to do is then do some free writing about what people feel and what you feel, or maybe what the characters feel, and try to sort of have a mix of concrete and emotional. So let's say that you have a 4-line verse. Maybe take the first 2 lines, make those concrete and sense-based, and then the last 2 lines make those emotion-based or more abstract. And usually you'll find that concrete detail comes first, because that gives the emotion the context, so people know why you're feeling that. So show people what's happening, and then tell people how you feel about it, or how they should feel about it. So when you hear that showing versus telling in songwriting, that's what that refers to, is senses and concrete language, and then emotional language. So show us and then tell us is a good way to think about it. Just what I had just said, songs use both types of language, usually show in the verse, tell in the chorus. Usually lyric content kind of goes between the 2 types. So intimate and vulnerable, and then broad and universal. So the intimate and vulnerable is really the details, and then the broad and universal is the sort of the overall feelings. Some genres, they do more telling than they do showing, which is what Paul had referred to. You know, those are more like pop, rock, R&B, dance songs. They definitely are more straightforward. Singer-songwriter, some rock, and then pop and folk. Country for sure, those sort of lean towards showing, but it's really about what feels right for you as the writer. And is your song communicating the emotions that you want the song to communicate? So what I thought we would do is do a 5-minute sense writing. So writing from sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, and movement. And we probably won't do 5 minutes because I think we're low on time, but let's do 2 minutes and see if you can write from every one of these perspectives. So the topic is a cracked sidewalk. And I'd like you to think of cracked sidewalk. What does it look like? What sounds does that bring up? What taste does that bring up? How does it feel? What's the touch? What's the smell? And then what movement is going on? So let's do 2 minutes writing about cracked sidewalk, and we will go starting now. All right, so there is our 2 minutes. So let's take a couple minutes and maybe does anybody want to share what they wrote in that time?
Happy to share.
Cool, go for it.
Wandering lines, chasms, meandering lazily on a tricycle, staring up at the trees, longing for shade on sun-baked concrete, warm sun on exposed skin, a melting cherry popsicle, struggling along and slowly fading to a stained red stick, splinters on the tongue as the grass kicks up from a nearby lawnmower purring gently in the summer.
Sorry, I was muted. That was great. There were a lot of images that you could just see that. So anybody else want to share?
I'll share.
Go for it.
Broken, beautiful, cracked, jagged, hole in the system, rocky bits, incomplete, sandy, faded, punched out, opened up, imperfect, close it, fix it, unappealing, annoying, crack lines.
Cool. So Patrick's writing was definitely more like written in more of story form, whereas as Tara's was more kind of just lines and sort of free flowing thought. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. So sometimes you might write, more in like a prose sort of way, but then other times it might come in little bursts. So that's definitely cool. So I think we have time for maybe one more. Tom, I see you're unmuted.
Sure. The crack in the sidewalk runs across almost perfectly straight. One side is now higher than the other. A young boy's bike rattles as he rides across it, and suddenly I vividly remember being that boy, riding my bike, feeling the jolt in my seat and on my arms.
Cool. I could see that going into a song. And that took 2 minutes. So I think that's a good way for people to come up with a lot of creative material in a short amount of time. So one of the other things that I've heard people say is their lyrics don't sound sincere, or their lyrics don't sound, natural. One of the things that can cause that is trying to use perfect rhyme all of the time. And I just rhymed there. That's funny. And one of the things is to learn the different rhyme types. There's 5 different types of rhymes. You have perfect rhyme, you have family rhyme, which are rhymes that have the same vowel sound, but the consonants on the end are within sort of the same family. So that would be an example would be like bad and bat. It's the same vowel, different consonant on the end. You also have additive rhyme, which is where you're adding a sound. So that would be like play and stain. You're adding the N sound. You also have subtractive rhyme, which is where you're taking the sound off. So it would be flip it. So like stain and play would be a subtractive. And then you also have assonance rhyme, where the vowel is the same, but the consonants on the end do not match. So that would be like sang and and bat. So sang and bat technically rhyme the way you sing the vowel, but the consonants are different. In the last type of rhyme, it's consonants rhyme where the vowels are not the same, but the consonant is. So that would be like bit and cut. So the T is actually what's rhyming, and those are the most unstable rhymes that that there are, which you can use to create prosody in what you're saying. So a lot of times if you're writing a serious song and you use all perfect rhymes, it won't sound believable because there's too much structure, there's too much sort of resolution in a perfect rhyme, and your topic doesn't match that resolution, so it can sound trite, or it doesn't sound like someone would just say it. The other thing is use everyday conversational language. Say it how you would say it. I think a lot of times we try to make songs sound very, poetic, or I'm trying to think if there's another word, but that comes across as being too forced as well. And also sometimes we use words that people don't actually say in everyday life. How many times do you tell your friends, "Oh, I'm really feeling blue today"? But people will write feeling blue in songs all the time. And I think at one time that word was accepted, but now that's been overused. So it's just completely cliche. And that's another thing that can make your song sound insincere, is you're saying things that have been said so many times before that they actually say nothing. Even the words broken heart has been in so many songs that doesn't really, it means something, but it doesn't really mean anything. Like, that doesn't give us anything new. So one thing to think about is how are you, how are you saying things to make it not cliche? And one of the ways to avoid cliche is to use free writing and sense-based words. So the more specific you are with sense-based language, the less cliche that you will be. So my songs don't tell a story. One of the things that you can do is start with a title and then write an outline that really spells out what happens with that title idea and the topic. So focus on one situation and don't try to cover too much. And one way to sort of get material on what you're going to write about is to use the who, when, where, what, why, and how, and answer those questions about your title. And then try to make your chorus mean more each time it comes around by really saying something different in the verses that really twist what the title or what the chorus or the hook means. Paul has a question. First, Joe, you said good exercise, surprising results. He used the word jag using a slang dictionary. Cool. What about cleverly twisting a cliche? Yes. You said who told you what was right was you're wrong. Yep. So cliches are fine in the context of either twisting them or saying them in a new way, or having them come after something that really says something different, where like the majority of it says something, and then you can sort of like tie it off with a cliche. But it really depends on how it sounds. And that's the thing with all of this stuff. There's really no rules. There's really just tools and tendencies. So whatever sounds good, go for it. One of the things that you can do from down here, I kind of listed, how to sort of advance a story, is in your verse, say what's going on. In the chorus, say how you feel about it. In the second verse, say what might happen next. And we've already talked about advancing that. Repeat the chorus, and then the bridge could be, where do we go from here? So those are some quick ways to think about that. Paul, there's a song that I heard by Ingrid Andres. The song is called Bad Advice, and the twist that she has is, I'm good at taking bad advice. So she uses kind of the opposite thing too, which is a great tool, is to kind of use that contrast of, the bad and good thing there. We'll go ahead and skip this exercise, but this exercise we'll upload this presentation to our website. At the MAS website, we'll have this in our there's a resources page, which we can get this uploaded after this. So one of the things that I've heard some people say is their songs get boring as people listen. One of the things that could be created by is the lyrics aren't creating that emotional connection. So you're not setting the scene or setting the context of why your listeners should feel something that you're wanting them to feel. Also, songs can get boring if you don't have enough contrast between your verses and your choruses. So definitely try to put as much contrast as you can between those song sections. Also, sometimes songs are too long. I've seen some people write songs that have, 5 or 6 verses. What people are used to hearing, that's probably too long. Most commercial songs that people listen to maybe have 2 verses and a bridge, and then that's about it. There's no real rule on how many verses you should have, but you should probably, if you have to have 5 or 6 verses, you should probably work on trying to fit that topic into a smaller package. Also, songs get boring when there's not a hook, so there's not memorable repetition. And that could be musical repetition, it could be lyrical repetition, it could be the way that you're playing a chord progression, something that the song hangs on. And then also the topic might not be universal enough. Sometimes we write about things that people don't connect with, and there's really no reason for people to, feel some of those things. The next thing is I don't play an instrument. I know that there's some people that join us that don't play an instrument and they write lyrics. So, one of the things that you can do is if you want to write full songs yourself, and maybe you're just a lyricist now, maybe take a couple of instrument or voice lessons so you don't have to be at professional level to write amazing songs. So being able to sing a melody is enough to write a full song, even if you don't have any instruments. And then just playing a few simple chords on guitar or piano can help you come up with chord progressions as well. One of the things that you can do if you don't play an instrument is maybe just practice those chords, or you could find a co-writer or a songwriting partner that complements your abilities. So maybe you find someone who makes tracks and you can do top line writing, or maybe you have someone that or they play an instrument, they maybe play piano or guitar, and then you can write the lyrics. Or get a metronome. There's metronome apps on most people's phones, so you could actually write the rhythm to a metronome. So if you do come into a co-writing situation and you've written lyrics, if you can show the musician how you think it goes, that will help them figure out how they can set music to that as well. So Tara says, top line, strongly recommend Rap Chat app. They have R&B, pop, dance, and beats to write on. That's cool. Cool. So Rap Chat, that's cool. And then Joe, you said you like writing with different instruments. Yep. And then Tara says, it's not just rap. That's cool. Yeah. One of the things that you can do too is if you just look for karaoke tracks on YouTube for songs that you don't know. And you could write to those tracks because you have if you don't know the song, you have no idea what the original melody would be. So that's kind of a trick for someone who's looking to practice top lining without, if they don't have access to some tracks. So the next thing that we have is I have writer's block. So how many of you at times are just stuck and you feel like don't know what to write about, or maybe you don't feel like writing? Doyle has both hands up. I think I saw Joe, Greg, pretty much everybody, myself included. So really the cure for writer's block is honestly just tapping into your know-how and the actual song craft. So just like we've been doing tonight is don't put too much thought into what you're going to write about and just pick something. Like look around the room and pick an object and write about it. Just free write. And then what you can do is take that free writing and look for words that rhyme or lines that rhyme and just plop them into a rhyme scheme and see like what that sounds like. It may not sound good or it may not read well, but maybe it'll strike something and you can edit, what that is. So I think being able to not feel so much pressure to finish something is definitely helpful too, because sometimes I think for me personally, the idea of like writing a full song right now would just be exhausting. But I could write a verse, you know what I mean? And then maybe tomorrow I can write a chorus, and then maybe the next day write a second verse, break it into little chunks. So looking at some of the other things, great songs are really not about what you write about, they're actually how you write them. And you can also listen to successful songs that you like and try exploring like the different genres, and maybe even try some of the structure that they do to see if that if that inspires you. We got some stuff in the chat. So Mary, you said you're stuck right now.
Well, right now I've got all the verses, and I've got like a, just kind of a marker chorus, but the chorus just isn't something that is just doing anything for me. And I just, I keep going back to, working on it, and it just doesn't seem to be happening. And especially, not only am I not like getting a good form for the chorus, but it's not fitting in with the verses that I've got. And I like the way the verses are set up. So that's kind of, it's a dilemma that, I'll work through it, but it's kind of a unique dilemma that I've never really, had before.
So do you think you're stuck like lyrically or melodically or both, or kind of
it's melodically.
Okay.
Because, it's a really nice groove for the chorus, or I'm sorry, for the verses. But then like I said, the working chorus that I've got right now, it's almost like going from like a real, smooth kind of jazz kind of a thing. Although the verses aren't that way, but it's just a very kind of a mellow kind of nighttime kind of feel to it. And then I've got this like, Broadway chorus coming in and it
Sure.
just doesn't mesh.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes it does just take a little bit of time, maybe put it away and come back to it. But I think one of the things you can do from just a tool perspective is write down the attributes of what the song is already, like what's happening already, and then try to do the opposite. So if you have a lot of short notes in your verse, then maybe try a lot of long notes in the chorus, or like if there's a lot of rests in the verse, maybe you have the notes really close together in the chorus, or kind of create that contrast to see if that, like, really break it down to the what's happening, and then what could it's like the this versus that. If we've already got this, what would that be? And then from the lyrical perspective, you could say like, okay, what is my verse saying? And then what is the overall underlying emotion that I want people to listen to? And then that's where that chorus, really comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Anne said you could write about being stuck.
Yeah.
Pat says whenever she hasn't written something for a while, she does chord progressions, and then that gets her going. Totally. Yep. So sometimes it's literally just jamming and seeing whatever comes. Doyle asked me, do I ever abandon a song that I'm stuck on? Yep. One of the sayings I used to live by is, if it doesn't flow, let it go. Not every song is meant to be finished. And not every song that you write is meant to be rewritten until it's perfect. Sometimes just look at it as practice. There's no harm in doing that. So one of the things that people struggle with too is really, how do they define their own songwriting style, and how do they figure out like what style that they really want to aspire to? So one of the things, as you think about yourself as a writer, think about the songs that you really like, and what are those qualities that you want to emulate or be like, or be quote unquote as good as, whatever that means. But describe what that is, and then what tools do you need to sort of get to that goal? So if you are like, wow, I really like so-and-so songwriter. They write the best melodies I've ever heard. I wish my writing was like that. It's like, okay, well, why aren't your songs like that? Try to figure out what's the difference between what they're doing and what you're doing, and then how do you reach that, and how do you bridge that? And then also a tool is practice what you're the worst at. You know, a lot of times we just do what comes naturally to us, and we're like, okay, this is fun. But what about practicing what you feel the weakest at? Maybe you feel like your melodies are lacking. Maybe you spend a week and you write melodies for the week or month or whatever that time frame is. And then also ask others to describe your music and see how it's coming across to them, because that can give you a sense of is your writing delivering the emotion that you want to deliver. Andrea Stolpe said that she asked her friends to listen to her songs and send her a picture that the song reminds her of, which I thought was an interesting concept, because it makes people think about, like, how is this visually coming across to someone? So like if you play your song and they send you a picture of a haystack, I think, Doyle, you just wrote a country song. But I thought that was a cool concept and kind of a cool idea to see how things are, how they're being received, because a lot of times we get so stuck in our head and we think we're saying something and then we're not necessarily doing that. Paul says he likes to sometimes write songs that make fun of the art and the craft of songwriting. Perfect. There was an artist, was it Sarah Bareilles? She wrote the song about not wanting to write another love song because she was like stuck, and her label was like, you need a love song, you need a love song. And she wrote the song about not writing a love song, and then that became like a big hit for her. So, you can definitely write about writing. One of the things that John Bennett had brought up before is songs don't sound modern, or they sound dated. A lot of times this is a product of melody, and also for sure a product of production. So melody, there are trends and there are sort of seasons on melody. And I think learning what different time frames and sort of what songs sound like in that time is something that is, you kind of have to do it on your own and really listen to what are the qualities of what's happening. I think a lot of modern commercial music doesn't have a lot of rests in it. There's a lot of notes. They're short notes. They're a very repetitive rhythmic pattern, very repetitive melodic pattern. That's what's in right now. And I think the way that you teach yourself is you listen to what are the charting songs right now. Like go to Billboard and look up what are the top pop songs, what are the top adult contemporary songs, what are the top country songs, like what are the qualities, and really listen to them, not as a music fan, but listen to the music as an analyst, and write down like what note range are they singing in? What are the notes long? Are they short? Are they medium notes? Are they having big pitch jumps? Are they not really changing pitch at all? A lot of Taylor Swift songs, in the verses, she almost sings the same note for almost the whole entire melody, but then her choruses have more, they open up and there's sort of more pitch changes there. But one of the things to do is just listen to what's going on and pay attention to those things and what's happening in the production. Are they using electronic sounding drums? Do they have acoustic guitar? Is there electric guitar? Are they using synthesizer pads? Like what are those, what's happening to hear that? What is the song structure? Is it verse, chorus, verse, chorus? Is it verse, pre-chorus, chorus? One thing that's happening in songs now is there's actually almost like a second chorus, which some people call a post-chorus. So paying attention to that song structure can help you not sound dated. Also, find a producer that makes modern sounding music and top line to it. Joe asks, is it okay to listen to chart playlists? Any that I use? You can listen to whatever you want. I would say one of the things that songwriters should focus on is really listening with a critical ear to see what works. The playlists that I usually listen to are on Apple Music and they have, if you just search for like pop music, they have different pop playlists. Some are like the brand new stuff, like just that comes out every week. So new music usually comes out on Friday. And then the other ones are maybe like, you know, is it like party pop or is it dance pop? Like they have different things that you, and if you search for country, it's the same thing. Like, is it party country? Is it country ballads? Is it all of these things? But it's definitely just do some searching on Billboard and different things like that as well. Oops, I'm advancing too fast here. So one of the things to do is also listen to what chord progressions people are using. And, you know, try to play with similar rhythmic patterns. And one of the ways to learn songs and styles is to learn cover songs and play them over and over so you kind of train your brain into sort of how those songs feel. So I was going to do another exercise, but I think we're low on time. So we'll keep going here. One of the things that we heard a lot is my songs all sound the same. So I feel this. I know John Bennett had said he does too. I think there is a style that no matter what type of song I write, no matter what instrument I use, no matter what, there's going to be like a little bit of Chad that comes out in that. And I have had to learn that that's okay, because I think about Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, Prince, Michael Jackson, like all of those people have a thing, right? Like if Bob Dylan covered an Ariana Grande song, he would still sound like Bob Dylan. And I think that's okay. I think we all have our own thing. And like I said earlier, it's like try to do the best that you can, but also try to write some different things too. So whatever you write first, if you write lyrics first, or if you're like write music first, do that last for a few songs and see how that comes out. Also try writing a song without an instrument. You know, try just singing and humming a melody and write to that. Excuse me. You can also listen to other genres and try to mimic those styles. Also, one way to get new styles coming through is work with different co-writers. You know, when you pull someone else in, that's a way for you to do things that maybe you on your own wouldn't have necessarily thought of. Jay says Johnny Cash is a great example of covering and sounding the same. For sure. Yep. And just understand that you have your style and that's okay. And, you know, try to be the best that you can. But I do hear some songwriters that aren't necessarily good. And they're like, well, that's just me. That's how I am. And it's like, they could still improve. So don't be that person. Stuck using the same chord progressions. How many of you have that issue? Sometimes we're limited by our ability to play, right? Sometimes we would like to play other chords, but we just either can't, or we haven't taught ourselves, or we don't know how. But one of the things to remember with chords is you can't copyright chord progressions. So the advice on trying new chord progressions is steal them. So listen to songs that you like and try taking that chord progression. And sometimes it's hard to divorce the chords and the melody that you're used to hearing. So sometimes you have to like step away from it a little bit. But a good trick is to just take the chords and write something new. And you could also change the order of those chords, give it a different feel. You could play them in a different frequency, a different pattern, meaning like, are you playing chords 1 chord per measure? Are you playing 2 chords per measure? Maybe change those types of things as well. So this is definitely a fun way to experiment. And a site for finding chord progressions that I really like, they have a free version, and then I think it's like $30 a year or something like that. It's called Chordify. And what Chordify does is it basically takes the songs that people have put into this program, and it actually, you listen to the song and it shows you what chords are being played in the order. So you can use it to pull out chord progressions, and it's a really cool site. So check out chordify.net. Tom says one of his most successful things he's written is a rewrite of the chord progression for Wagon Wheel. Cool. What's your song called, Tom?
The song it's called the Minnesota Song.
Cool.
And so it's kind of a long and ode to all things Minnesota kind of thing. But
cool.
I started with Wagon Wheel and I moved the E minor to a different spot, and there we go. We're off to the races.
Cool. Would you have done that if you hadn't taken that chord progression, do you think? Do you think that that is what opened you up?
I'm not sure, and it's been so long now, but I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and the chord progression, I think, made it easier to put the words where they needed to be, to find the words.
For sure. Cool. And Jay, I see that you have your hand up. Did you want to make a point, or was that left over from before?
No, so actually I had a question for when this is over. I don't want to slow the progress because you said the time is slowing, so I can wait.
Okay, perfect. Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah is a great example of chords that go together well, for sure. The other night I was writing a song and I was using the chord progression from a Carly Rae Jepsen song that I liked how it sounded. And it was interesting because at first I thought it was modulating keys, but the more that I sort of played around, I discovered that it was just in a Lydian mode, and it was starting on the 4 of the scale. And just the way the order of the chords wasn't necessarily how my ear would hear it. So it was fun to play that. One thing that I do for chord progressions is I actually take a dice. So in any key, you basically have 6 chords that are the most usable for commercial music, and there's 6 sides to a dice. And what I will do is I'll roll it, and that will give me the number of the chord in the scale that I will start with, and then I'll do like a chord progression that way, and it sort of randomizes, how to, makes me do something that I probably wouldn't have done on my own. So that's a fun exercise to do too. Let's go to the next thing. So one of the things that I get asked a lot, and I know that this workshop is really more about craft, and tonight we're kind of really breaking it down and really talking about a lot of struggles, but a lot of times in these workshops we are talking about certain topics and really diving into what do those tools look like. And we have mixers within MAS to talk about the other parts of songwriting. But a lot of times people ask, like, once my song is done, what do I do with it? So I just kind of wrote down some ideas. One of the things is really deciding what is the goal of the song. Are you looking to put it on your album? Are you looking to have it on someone else's album? You could self-publish through like CD Baby or like DistroKid. You could post on social media. You could pitch to local artists. You could perform your own songs as the artist. Record it. You could write down the lyrics and just kind of have it, stored away. You could submit it to songwriting contests. You could get the song critiqued, which we do a monthly song critique the last Wednesday of every month with MAS, and we've been doing those by Zoom. So you could have other songwriters listen to it. You could try to send it to sync libraries to get it synced to video or TV shows, movies, and commercials. Or, of course, you could try to get your song published as well. So one of the things that I wanted to just cover quickly is just kind of my understanding of, how do I get my songs published? One thing to remember is that publishers are in business to make money. So publishers want songs that sell. So what that means is publishers want hits. They want something that is going to be on the radio. They want something that is going to really generate streams and generate income. So usually the big time publishers you probably need to connect with through either networking or attorneys, because most of the time they don't accept unsolicited demos. So just sending your songs unsolicited to most publishers is probably going to get them thrown in the trash without even being opened. Really, to meet people who are involved with publishers, you probably need to be in Nashville or LA, because you need to be able to meet the people and sort of have relationships so you have a foot in the door. And you really need to be able to write for the radio, because your competition is the songs that have already been published and are already sort of out there making money. And one of the things that's kind of ironic is songs that are on the radio are usually 2 to 3 years old. So if you're not in kind of a music center and you're not connected to the right people, you are hearing music that, and like most of the time we're hearing music that is old to the publishers. So if you're in those cities, you can actually be ahead of the curve by hearing what people are doing now that'll be on the radio in 2 to 3 years. So the internet helps a little bit, but really being in those places. And I think Wayne Hamilton always says you must be present to win. And I think that's true with getting published. I think most, it's not very often that you hear people being in places like Minnesota, you know, starting from not being published and becoming published from here. So, and the best thing to get better is to really write hundreds of songs and make sure that you're writing songs that no one else is writing. Tara says, what are the best sync libraries? I'm not the best person to ask about that because I don't really chase that part of it. In the past, I had used a library that was called Pump Audio, and I think that became, they got bought by someone else. But I think if you maybe search for Pump Audio, it may let you figure out who that is. But a lot of them you have to audition, so you have to send some of your work into it, and then they will review it, and then they'll say if you can be in the sync library or not. And most of the time, your recordings need to be basically CD ready or radio ready for them to take your music, because it needs to be super high quality for TV and commercials and things like that. So how do you get your songs recorded by other artists? Well, one of the easiest ways to get recorded is if you write songs with the artist. So those of you that are focusing on writing with Taylor Swift, that's probably not going to happen unless you know her. So focus on local artists and focus on new artists online. So look for the local people that are coming up and get your foot in the door and write with them. Instead of trying to write with the top of the mountain, make sure you write with the people that are kind of on their way up, and network, and make sure that you show the value that you bring to other people, and just don't, you know, try to get stuff from them as well. And I just wrote on here, every major label artist has started as someone who's unsigned. So meet the people on their way up and become part of their team. Jay says, get to know Taylor Swift personally. Yes, that would be helpful if you can do that. And also, you know, do it all for fun and shoot for the commercial success, but don't hang your like your career on having huge commercial success, because the moral of the story is that it's really hard to make a living with music, and it's possible, but it's kind of not likely at the level that most of us dream of doing it. You know, there's a lot of people making music. They say that Spotify has 40,000 songs every day uploaded to Spotify. So if you do the math on how many songs are uploaded every year, it's crazy to think, how do you rise to the top? So I think dream big, but also find success in the process, because I think that will keep you a little bit more sane. I wrote down on here some great YouTube channels that you can, somebody asked about apps for songwriting. YouTube is a great place to learn both songwriting and music production. Some of these ones that I put on here, there's Songwriting Chop Shop, a guy by the name of Tony in Ireland. He puts together these really great songcraft videos. Also songwork.com, which is on YouTube. That's Steve Seskin, Andrea Stolpe, Pat Pattison. They used to have a site called Songwork, and a lot of their videos are still up, and there's some really good nuggets that are in there. Berklee College of Music, they have an awesome YouTube channel. Songwriting Academy, there's a guy who wrote songs for like Backstreet Boys. I think he may have written with Adele and some other people. He has a great channel on YouTube where he analyzes hit songs and then uses those concepts on how you can use it in your writing. Then also Songtown. Some of you are probably members of Songtown, but they have a bunch of free videos on YouTube as well that you can watch. So that's basically what I had prepared for tonight. So we do have some time to go over any other questions or any other topics that you all might have. So I know, Jay, you had a question. Do you want to ask that now or do you want to wait?
Oh, no, that'd be great. So as a beginning lyric writer, I'm of course got a lot to learn, and that's fine. I'm actually really looking forward to it. There's a lot I don't know about instrumentally, and that's fine too. What I'm really interested in is finding whether or not someone with experience can recommend a reference book or guidebook that ties keys and major minor scales to emotions, things that are commonly associated, so that when I'm writing these lyrics, I can kind of reference along, figure out maybe what kind of key I should start in, and try to like put this into my MIDI sequencer and kind of like go from there. That way I'm not wasting time that I just
Yeah. So there is a book that Berklee publishes. It's through Berklee Press, and you can get it on probably Barnes and Noble, Amazon. But it's by Jimmy Kachulis, and Jimmy Kachulis teaches harmony and melody at Berklee College of Music. And the book is really it's called the Harmony Workshop, and it's basically a workbook on harmony, and it's all about chords and how to use them effectively on lyrics. And there's a melody one too. So if you search for Berklee Harmony Workshop or Berklee Melody Workshop on Amazon, the books actually come with a CD that has actual examples of the concepts that they're talking about, and it actually breaks each chapter out into like a workbook style, to where you can basically follow along or do like just sections until you practice what concept that they're doing. And then there's different levels of sort of exercises that they do, but those are extremely helpful to do those. So someone is asking how you spell the name. So it's Jimmy Kachulis. And he wrote the workshop books on melody and harmony. As far as lyrics go, anything by Pat Pattison and Andrea Stolpe are those are kind of the go-to resources for lyric writing. Pat's stuff gets a little sort of deep and sort of heady into like very minute structure, but they're definitely good books to sort of have and learn from in small chunks. I don't think you could read it straight through.
I don't think we have to worry about that.
Cool, but good question. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything that they want to cover while we have the group? Yep. So I'll put Pattison, and then Andrea Stolpe. Those are the two people, or they're instructors at Berklee. Andrea does retreats and online workshops. So I actually just attended one last weekend. She has another one coming up in February, but if you look for her website, she has some really good material. So Paul says, home studios. What do you want to talk about home studios, Paul? Oh, you're on mute.
Oops. Yeah.
There you
Sorry about that. Well, I don't know how. I know Doyle real well, and I know Doyle has a small home studio, and I have one too. I'm just curious to know where people are from and the accessibility they have to studios. I'm 200 miles north of Minneapolis.